I don't know why I was still awake. It was stupidly late, and I'd been sitting there for hours, aimless, letting the night drag on. I felt off, restless, bored, and maybe even a little miserable. Not that I'd admit it out loud. So, like an idiot, I turned on my old computer. The screen buzzed to life, its glow spilling into the dark room. I didn't have a plan, didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe I just wanted to feel something, anything other than the usual emptiness. And that's when it popped up, like a ghost I'd tried to forget. Arcadia Online. I hadn't seen it in years, not since the servers were supposedly shut down. The MMORPG had been a second life back then, a vast, sprawling escape for me and thousands of others. And yet here it was, working somehow. I hovered my mouse over the login button, hesitating. My old username flashed in the corner, Vexor. A dull thud built in my chest. This wasn't right. I never remembered it saving my login. But before my brain could argue, my hand clicked. Logging in. The words blinked on screen. A soft, metallic whisper brushed the edge of my hearing, as if someone stood just behind me. I turned quickly. My room was still and quiet, bathed in the cold glow of the monitor. The progress bar crept forward, halting like a struggling machine. As it loaded, memories filtered back. Grinding quests late into the night, waging wars against guild rivals, trading cheap loot for gold. Names of friends I hadn't spoken to in years resurfaced. Kira Blade, Fallen 9, Astrax. People who used to feel so close, but whose voices were now lost echoes. The bar froze at 99%. My breath hitched. Then a voice spoke. "Welcome back, Vexor." The voice wasn't a game jingle. It was soft and toneless, as if spoken through old speakers. My screen jumped, flickering. Then suddenly, my character appeared, right where I left him. I stared at him. At me. Vexor stood at the edge of Glimmerfall, the beginner town. I'd spent countless hours there when I first started playing. But now it looked off. The buildings were splintered, textures peeling like rotting wallpaper. The cobblestone streets were cracked and blackened. The sky wasn't the bright blue I remembered. It was dark, bruised, and swirling, like a storm about to consume the world. Vexor's gear was untouched. The sword on his back, the glowing chest plate, all the relics of a player who had once been somebody. But the town, it looked like a place left to decay, abandoned. I moved my mouse, feeling the response drag as if the game itself resisted my commands. NPCs were scattered in their usual spots. The blacksmith, the innkeeper, the market stalls. But none of them moved. They just stood there, watching. Their heads turned all at once, jerking like marionettes on the same unseen string. Their faces, blank, expressionless, were stretched somehow, eyes too wide, mouths curled slightly upward, like grins forced too far. I stopped Vexor in front of the blacksmith NPC Dahlan Forgehand. He'd been there forever, hammering a phantom anvil and repeating the same line about sharpening blades. I clicked on him. Nothing happened. His face, pixelated and rough, seemed to twitch. His mouth opened, and instead of a dialogue box, a garbled sound crackled through my headphones. It wasn't game audio, it was a voice, low, static-filled, and unmistakably human. "You left us." I yanked off my headphones and spun around, my chest tightening. The room was empty. My curtains were drawn, my door shut. There was no one there. When I turned back, Dahlan's face filled the screen. The pixels of his eyes had darkened, pupils dilated as though he were alive. His smile stretched beyond its limits, cracking the edges of his cheeks like torn fabric. "Why did you leave us?" The words appeared in chat. I didn't type them. "I tried to log out." My mouse moved to the menu in the corner, shaking slightly. But the Quit Game button was grayed out, unresponsive. My fingers smashed against the escape key, but nothing happened. Vexar stood motionless. The NPCs had all turned to face him, their bodies frozen in place. The market vendors, the guards, even the children, all staring, their heads tilted slightly to the left. The chat box began to scroll. "You forgot us. You left us. Don't go." My fingers hovered unsteady over the keys, twitching as though unsure whether to act. I forced my cursor to move Vexar forward. Maybe it was just a glitch, some corrupted code looping through old NPC scripts. I needed to get away from them. As I left the town square, I realized something was following me. I jerked the camera around. A single NPC, a little girl I didn't recognize, stood at the edge of my screen. She wore a tattered blue dress, her hair dark and matted. Her face was locked in the same stretched grin, her eyes impossibly black. She didn't move when I looked at her. But when I turned away and walked further, she was closer. I broke into a sprint, forcing Vexar toward the edge of Glimmerfall. I knew there was an old path leading into the Whispering Woods, an area usually reserved for low-level players. My frames dropped as I pushed forward, the screen tearing with dim white static. The woods were worse. The trees were wrong. Bark textures warped into pulsating veins, and shadows clawed at the path, their flickering shapes reaching for Vexar. There was sound now, grew warped. A chorus of layered whispers, each one indistinct yet suffocating. Through the branches I saw movement. NPCs, dozens of them, stood within the woods, their bodies half hidden among the blackened trees. They didn't move, but I knew they were watching. Eyes followed me wherever I went. I stopped Vexar. My chest tightened, each beat pounding uncomfortably hard. The little girl in the blue dress was there too, at the edge of the trees. This time she moved. Her body twitched violently as she stepped forward, one leg dragging behind her. Her arms hung limp. She glitched closer, flickering like a broken model. In chat, new text appeared. "You're not supposed to be here." I didn't type it. Then my screen flashed white. The sound cut to silence. And when it came back, I wasn't in the woods anymore. I was somewhere else. The game world had shifted. Vexar stood in a field of gravestones. Rows upon rows of them stretched into the fog. Each one was identical. Gray, cracked stone with names etched into their faces. The names weren't random. The first one read Vexar. The second, Kirablade. I moved Vexar forward, my breath shallow and sharp. I recognized them all. These were the usernames of old friends, guildmates, players I hadn't spoken to since Arcadia died. Each name was followed by a date, some from years ago, some from last week. One gravestone near the edge stopped me cold. It had my real name carved into it. "Why did you come back?" a voice whispered behind me. I spun Vexar around. The girl in the blue dress was closer now, her unnatural smile cutting through the shadows. Her head twitched to the side, her frozen grin unchanged. The screen fractured into chaotic distortions, cracks of light breaking through pixelated darkness. My mouse wouldn't respond. And slowly on its own, Vexar began to walk toward her. Vexar's movement wasn't mine anymore. My mouse refused to respond, and my keyboard clattered uselessly as I slammed the keys. He moved forward, each step dragging him closer to the girl in the blue dress. Her head tilted, twitching with jerking motions as she stared through the screen, her black void-like eyes drilling into me. The whispers returned, no longer subtle. They poured into my headphones like a rising tide, voices overlapping in broken, static-filled bursts. "You don't belong here. Why did you forget us? We remembered you. The gravestones blurred as the screen distorted, lines of white static tearing across the field. The girl's smile stretched unnaturally, splitting the edges of her face like tearing fabric, her jaw dropping too far open. My chest heaved as Vexor stepped closer, his pixelated armor catching glimmers of the fractured light. And then the girl screamed. It wasn't human. It wasn't even animal. It was a choppy, piercing wail, fractured by static bursts, tearing through the room. My speakers crackled like they might burst. I scrambled to yank my headphones off, but the sound didn't stop. It reverberated through the room, seeping into my skull. The screen froze. From there it went black. For a moment, everything was still. I stared at the dark monitor, my own reflection pale and shaky. I reached for the power button on the tower, desperate to turn the thing off, but before I could, the screen flickered back to life. It wasn't Vexor anymore. It was me. My room was displayed on screen, pixel perfect. The desk, the chair, the weak glow of my desk lamp. It was all there, rendered with unsettling accuracy. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the screen. The game camera zoomed slightly, focusing on my chair. Empty. The whispers returned, softer now, wrapping around me like a cold mist. Do you see it yet? I spun around, half expecting to see someone standing in the shadows behind me. But my room was empty. The only sound was the whir of the computer fan. When I turned back to the screen, Vexor was back. But something had changed. His armor was gone, replaced by tattered robes. His face, it wasn't his anymore. The pixelated features twisted, taking on my likeness piece by piece. My jaw dropped. My character was becoming me. The chat box reappeared. It's always been you. The camera shifted, pulling back to reveal Vexor standing at the edge of a town I didn't recognize. The warped buildings pulsed as though alive, textures bubbling and crawling with unnatural motion. Black vines crawled up their sides, pulsing faintly as though veins ran through them. The sky above was a sickly green, with cracks of crimson light splitting through it like bleeding wounds. NPCs filled the streets. They were hunched and malformed, their bodies bending at impossible angles. Some crawled with jerking, unnatural motions, their joints snapping loudly as they dragged forward. Others stood perfectly still, their heads snapping toward Vexor as he walked past. Their eyes glowed subtly, their mouths twisted into those awful, broken smiles. I didn't move him. He moved on his own, weaving through the grotesque town as though pulled by an unseen force. The camera followed, jittering with faint glitches as the whispers grew louder. Fragments of words echoed in the soundscape. Left us. Forgotten. We remember. Vexor stopped in front of a large building, a guild hall. Its doors were open, creaking feebly in the wind. The structure towered ominously, its walls tangled with pulsing black vines as though it were breathing. The chat box flickered. Home. Against every instinct, I let him enter. The interior was worse. The once grand hall was in ruins, its floorboards rotting and coated in thick, oozing sludge. Shadows clung to every corner, shifting in ways that defied logic. The banners on the walls were tattered and blackened, their original colors erased by time. In the center of the hall stood a long table. Around it sat NPCs or players, at least what was left of them. Their avatars were grotesque, twisted into barely recognizable shapes. One had a head that stretched upward, the neck elongating unnaturally into the shadows. Another's arms dragged on the ground, grotesque tentacles bending at impossible angles. Their faces flickered and warped, features twisting through layers of corrupted pixels. And they were all staring at Vexor. At me. One of them stood. Their body convulsed as they moved, limbs snapping into place with violent jerks. When they spoke, their voice was layered with static and something hauntingly familiar. "You left us behind." The others followed, rising from their seats one by one, their broken bodies convulsing as they surrounded Vexar. "You forgot us. You abandoned us. But we didn't forget." The camera zoomed closer, locking onto one of the NPCs. Their face shifted, pixel by pixel, until it formed something chillingly familiar. It was Kira Blade, my old guildmate. Her avatar's mouth moved and her voice broke through the static. "We waited for you." A wave of nausea hit me, my stomach tightening as the reality of it sank in. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. I reached for the power button again, slamming it down with all my weight. The computer didn't respond. The game stayed on, and the whispers swelled, no longer weak but angry, rising like a storm. The NPCs closed in on Vexar, their contorted faces alight with malice. In the chat, text appeared, line after line, typed by invisible hands. "Why did you leave us? Why didn't you come back? You can't leave again." Vexar dropped to his knees, his body jerking violently as though the game itself was breaking him apart. The screen flickered, and for a brief moment I saw my own face reflected in the pixels. Then it hit me. The game wasn't just running itself. It was alive. Vexar collapsed onto the rotting floor of the guild hall, his limbs contorted as though the game were forcing him to move. The NPCs, my former guildmates, or whatever they had become, circled him, their disjointed movements punctuated by the snapping of their warped limbs. The whispers filled the air around me, pressing against my ears like a swarm of unseen voices. They weren't just gibberish anymore. They were names. Names of people I knew, people I'd played with years ago. Astrax, Fallen 9, Kira Blade. I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles white. The screen fractured violently, and my vision blurred as though the room itself bent to the chaotic rhythm of the game. Suddenly, the chat exploded with text, scrolling too quickly to read. One sentence repeated over and over, cutting through the chaos. "We waited for you, Vexar." The game forced Vexar to his feet. He moved sluggishly, his arms jerking as though marionette strings pulled him. The NPCs parted, clearing a path to a massive door at the far end of the hall. The door was unlike anything I'd seen in the game before. It was made of a black, pulsating material, veined with glowing red streaks. As Vexar approached, the veins flared and the whispers consolidated into a single voice, a deep, raspy tone that resonated through my entire body. "Come in." I fought the controls, trying desperately to turn Vexar back, but the game had total control. He reached the door, his hand lifting to push it open. The temperature in my room seemed to drop as the door creaked outward. Beyond the door stretched a boundless darkness, speckled with indistinct glowing shapes that shifted in the void, faces, thousands of them, floating like fragments of shattered memories, flickering in and out of focus. Some were screaming, their mouths wide and hollow. Others simply stared, their dead eyes locked onto Vexar as he stepped into the abyss. The chat box reappeared, one line at a time. "This is where they wait. The forgotten. The abandoned." The voices returned, layered and overlapping, filling the room with a cacophony of anger and sorrow. I felt something crawling up my spine, an icy touch that made me shudder. It wasn't just the game anymore. It was pressing into my reality, seeping through the walls, the air, the sound. The faces in the void began to shift. Slowly they morphed into something else. Familiar shapes, familiar details. They were avatars. I recognized them all. Every player I'd ever interacted with in Arcadia Online. Every raid party, every guildmate, every stranger I'd traded with. They were all here, trapped in this endless black space. And they were staring at me. I wanted to scream, but my throat tightened, every breath sharp and shallow. My hands hovered uselessly over the keyboard. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. One of the faces floated closer to Vexar, its features glitching and distorting with every movement. It stopped inches from him, staring through the screen. Its mouth opened slowly, and a voice spilled out. Not through the game, but through my speakers. "You did this." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I hadn't done anything. I just stopped playing, like everyone else. The game had died. The servers shut down. How could this be my fault? Another face moved closer. This one was horribly familiar. It was Kira Blade. Her once beautiful avatar was now twisted and warped, her hair hanging in messy strands, her eyes hollow sockets bleeding static. When she spoke, her voice cracked with emotion. "You left us behind. We trusted you. We waited for you." I tried to respond, but my voice barely escaped in a whisper. "I didn't know. I didn't..." The game didn't care. The void began to close in, the faces pressing closer and closer to Vexar. Their whispers grew louder, more frantic, overlapping into a deafening roar. Words blurred together, forming a single, chilling message. "You can't leave again." Vexar's body jerked violently as the screen glitched again. The faces melted into the darkness, replaced by something far worse. A mirror. The infinite void was now lined with towering, uneven mirrors, each reflecting a distorted version of Vexar and me. My warped reflection locked eyes with me, unblinking and unnatural. Slowly it raised a hand, though I hadn't moved. The chat box flickered. "Look closer." I leaned in, my breath fogging the screen. The reflection of my room in the mirror wasn't quite right. The shadows were too long, the edges too sharp, and there, in the corner, just out of focus, I saw it. A figure. Its outline emerged from the shadows, faint details sharpening into something unmistakable. Sunken eyes, a twisted grin splitting its face like a wound, and a body that twitched unnaturally. A sharp chill stabbed through me. I spun around, heart pounding. Nothing. When I turned back, the figure was closer. Its outline was clearer now, its distorted features cutting through the darkness like a specter. It wasn't confined to the screen anymore. It had crossed into my space. I scrambled back from my desk, my chair screeching against the floor. The screen flickered again, the game camera zooming in on Vexar. His face was no longer his. It was mine, rendered in jagged, pixelated horror. The chat box filled with one final message. "We're coming." The computer shut itself off, plunging my room into darkness. I wasn't alone. The room's silence pressed in on me, broken only by the buzz of the idle computer. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as I scanned the shadows. The figure, the one I'd seen reflected in the game, was nowhere to be found. But the sensation of being watched clung to me like a second skin. I stood, my legs trembling as I reached for the light switch. My fingers grazed the wall, fumbling in the dark. When I finally flipped the switch, the overhead light flickered once and then stayed on, casting a pale, sickly glow over the room. It was empty, or so it seemed. The monitor suddenly turned itself back on, illuminating the desk with its cold, bluish glow. There was no startup screen, no desktop, just the game. Vexar was still there, but he wasn't moving. He stood frozen in front of one of the mirrors in the void, his back to the camera. The reflection in the mirror wasn't his anymore. It was mine. But this time, it wasn't just my face. Behind the reflection, the figure loomed, its twisted grin splitting far beyond the limits of its face. Its black, hollow eyes seemed to pierce through the glass, staring directly at me. The chat box flickered to life again. "Why are you running?" I stumbled back, knocking over my chair. My heartbeat roared as I stared at the screen. Vexar began to move, not by my hand, but by the game's will. He stepped closer to the mirror, his reflection warping and twisting with every step. The whispers returned, crawling through the speakers like an unseen force. I covered my ears, trying to block them out, but they only grew louder. They weren't just voices anymore. They were screams. Familiar screams. Kira Blade, Falren 9, Astrax. Their names echoed in my head, blending with the cacophony. The monitor flickered again, and the camera zoomed in on the mirror until it filled the entire screen. My distorted reflection stared back, grinning with that same torn, inhuman smile. Then it spoke. "You can't escape." The words didn't echo from the speakers. They resonated in the room itself, heavy and alive. I froze, my blood turning to ice. The voice was low and grating, distorted like the whispers in the game. Slowly I turned to face the source. At first there was nothing, just the empty room bathed in the dim glow of the monitor. But then in the corner, I saw it. The figure. The thing was hunched, its limbs all wrong, too long, too thin, like something out of a nightmare. Its body twitching violently as though struggling to stay upright. Its face was wrong, a fractured blur of sharp edges and flickering shadows. The same horrifying smile distorted across its features. The black voids, where its eyes should have been locked onto mine. I opened my mouth, but my voice betrayed me, lost in the heavy air. My legs refused to move, rooted to the spot as the thing shambled toward me, its movements jerky and unnatural. The atmosphere thickened, pressing down like the weight of the game itself. The figure stopped inches from me. Its breath was cold against my skin, a sound like static crackling deep in its throat. Slowly it reached out, its elongated fingers twitching as they grazed my arm. A searing ache rippled through me, clawing at the edges of my mind. It wasn't physical. It was something deeper, something indescribable. My vision blurred, my thoughts scattering like shards of broken glass. I felt as though my very essence was being pulled apart, piece by piece. The whispers swelled to a deafening roar, and the figure leaned closer, its mouth yawned open, distorting into a grotesque, endless maw. The screen behind me flickered violently, drawing my attention. Vexar was still there, but he wasn't alone. The NPCs had returned, their twisted forms crowding the void. They stood in a perfect circle around him, their heads jerking to one side, snapping into position with an eerie precision. One by one they spoke. "You left us. You forgot us. You abandoned us." Their voices layered together, forming a haunting chorus of anger and sorrow. Vexar stood motionless, his body shaking as though he were fighting against the game's control. The chat box filled with lines of text, each one more chilling than the last. We waited. We remembered. Now it's your turn. The figure behind me let out a low, rumbling growl, and I turned back just in time to see it lunge, its hands wrapped around my throat, cold and unyielding. My vision darkened as the whispers crescendoed, drowning out everything else. And with no warning, it ended as suddenly as it began. I woke up on the floor, gasping for air. My room was quiet, the monitor dark. The figure was gone, but its presence lingered, like a shadow burned into my mind. I stumbled to my feet, my body shaking as I reached for the power button on the computer. It was over. It had to be. But when I pressed it, the screen flared back to life. The game was still there. Vexar was gone. In his place stood me, not my avatar, not a distorted reflection. It was me. Pixelated, lifeless, and staring directly at the camera. The chat box appeared one final time. "Welcome home." The words on the screen burned into my mind. Welcome home. My pixelated doppelganger stared out of the screen, its glassy eyes fixed on me as though it could see through the monitor. The room felt colder now, the kind of chill that sank into your bones and refused to leave. My breath fogged the air as I stepped back from the desk, my legs trembling with every move. I couldn't process it. My reflection in the game, a perfect, warped recreation of me, stood where Vexar once was. It wasn't just the face anymore. It was every detail. My unkempt hair, my hoodie with the fraying cuffs, even the faint shadow of exhaustion under my eyes. It wasn't just a copy. It was me. The chat box flickered again. "You've been here all along." "No," I whispered aloud. My voice was hoarse, cracking against the oppressive silence of the room. "No, I haven't. This isn't real." I pressed the power button again, my hands shaking, but nothing happened. I ripped the cord from the wall, but the screen glowed defiantly, untouched by the loss of power. My doppelganger cocked its head slightly, mirroring my movements. The chat box filled with more text. "You forgot the rules. You can't quit. You're ours now." My breathing quickened as the screen began to distort again, the edges of the display warping and bleeding into the darkness of the room. The game wasn't confined to the monitor anymore. It was spilling out, consuming the space around me. The shadows crept outward, spreading like ink across the walls and ceiling, shifting with a sinister life. From those shadows, figures began to emerge. First, it was the girl in the blue dress. Her movements were the same as before, jittery, disjointed, as though her body was fighting against itself. Her dark, hollow eyes locked onto me, her smile stretching wide and splitting the edges of her face like tearing fabric. Then came the others. One by one, the twisted NPCs from the game materialized in my room, their forms flickering and glitching as though they were struggling to maintain their shape. The blacksmith, the merchant, the guards, they were all there, each more grotesque than the last. Their twisted limbs jutted out at impossible angles, their faces locked in grotesque, rigid expressions. They surrounded me, closing in with slow, measured steps. The chat box updated again. "You left us to rot. Now we'll make sure you stay." I stumbled back, tripping over the fallen chair and landing hard on the floor. The figures loomed over me, their warped forms casting contorted shadows that crawled across the walls. I tried to cry out, but my voice was buried, swallowed by the oppressive silence. The girl in the blue dress stepped forward, her head tilting as she crouched beside me. Her movements were wrong, inhuman, like a puppet controlled by broken strings. She reached out, her cold, pixelated hand brushing against my cheek. "You belong to us now." Her voice wasn't just in my ears, it was in my head, echoing through every corner of my mind. My hands scraped at the floor, grasping at nothing as I struggled to pull away. But there was nowhere to go. The room itself felt alive, bending and twisting around me like the corrupted world of the game. The figures pressed closer, their hollow eyes burning into me. The whispers returned, louder than ever, each voice overlapping in a chaotic symphony of anger and sorrow. "Stay with us. Forever." The screen on the monitor changed again. My doppelganger began to move, stepping forward as though crossing the boundary between the game and my world. The closer it got to the camera, the more distorted its face became. The pixels stretched and warped, but the grin spread unnaturally, splitting the edges of its face like torn fabric. The shadows around me pulsed in time with its movements. My vision blurred, my head pounding with an unbearable pressure as the game forced itself deeper into my reality. I could feel it now, something pulling at me, dragging me closer to the screen. The girl in the blue dress leaned in, her cold breath brushing against my ear. Her voice was soft, almost tender as she whispered, "It's your turn." The room went dark. I don't know how long I was out. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in my room. I was in the game. The air clung heavy and foul, thick with the stench of rot. The ground beneath me was soft and damp, shifting faintly like living flesh. I looked down at myself, my hands twitching as I realized what had happened. I was no longer me. I was Vexar. The armor, the tattered robes, it was all there. My body moved, but it wasn't my own anymore. I was a puppet, dragged forward by invisible strings as the world of the game unfolded around me. The town I once knew was gone, replaced by an endless void filled with the twisted forms of NPCs. Their hollow eyes pierced through the shadows, following my every move without wavering. The whispers followed me wherever I went, growing louder with every step. In the distance, I saw a familiar figure. It was me. The pixelated doppelganger lingered in the distance, still yet unnervingly present, watching as I approached. Its face was calm, almost serene as it raised a hand and waved. The chat box appeared one final time. "Welcome to Arcadia." I couldn't fight it anymore. The realization was a weight I couldn't lift, crushing me with every step forward. I wasn't in control. Vexar wasn't my avatar anymore. I was his. The boundaries between player and character had dissolved, leaving me trapped in this decaying, unholy version of Arcadia Online. The doppelganger stood motionless, a stark and horrifying mirror of who I was, or who I used to be. Its glassy eyes tracked me, its expression calm yet hollow. It didn't move, but I could feel its presence pressing down on me, like a vice. The whispers swelled into fractured screams, cutting through the corrupted void around me. Shadows writhed along the ground, pulsating like living things as the NPCs emerged from the darkness. Their forms were twisted, half-finished, their bodies a grotesque blend of flesh and code. One by one, they began to speak. "You left us. You forgot us. Now you'll stay." Their voices overlapped, a chorus of despair and anger that drowned out everything else. My head throbbed with the intensity of it, the sound vibrating deep into my skull. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound caught and dissolved in the oppressive air. My body was no longer mine, it was just a vessel, dragged along by whatever force controlled this place. The doppelganger finally moved. It turned and began to walk, its steps unnervingly smooth as it led me deeper into the void. The NPCs parted to let it pass, their hollow eyes locked onto me as I stumbled after it. The void shifted. The ground beneath my feet crumbled, replaced by something far worse. It wasn't stone or dirt anymore. It was flesh, writhing, veined flesh that squelched underfoot with every step. The air reeked of decay, thick and suffocating, as though the world itself was rotting from the inside out. The doppelganger stopped in front of a massive structure. It wasn't a building, it was a heart, a colossal organ that throbbed with life, its surface slick with blood an oozing black ichor, veins spread out from its base, snaking across the ground and disappearing into the shadows. I tried to stop, to pull away, but my body kept moving. The doppelganger turned to face me, its grin splitting wider as it raised a hand pointing to the heart. The chat box appeared again. This is the origin. This is the conclusion. The NPCs closed in behind me, forming a wall of twisted, broken bodies. Their faces flickered and glitched, their mouths moving in silent screams as they pushed me forward. The whispers grew louder, forming a single, unified voice that echoed through the void. Give yourself to us. The doppelganger stepped aside, gesturing to the heart. My body moved on its own, drawn inexorably toward the pulsing mass of flesh and veins. Its oppressive heat pressed against me, alive and searing, as though the air itself carried its warmth. The ground beneath me quaked with every beat, the sound hammering relentlessly in my ears. As I reached the base of the heart, a tendril lashed out, coiling tightly around my wrist like a living chain. Its touch burned through me, leaving a trail of raw, fiery agony. As it yanked me closer, more tendrils followed, snaking around my arms and legs, binding me in place before lifting me off the ground. I struggled, every instinct screaming to escape, but the tendril's grip was unyielding. The heart split open, revealing rows of barbed, uneven teeth glistening with black ichor. Its pulsing maw beckoned, an impossible void of consuming darkness. The chat box flickered into view one final time. You are one of us now. The tendrils hauled me forward, dragging me into the heart's ragged maw. A searing agony surged through me as the tendrils tore into my being, breaking me apart in ways I couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just physical. The pain reached deeper, clawing into my mind and unraveling every thought, every memory. My very essence dissolved into the consuming void. A heavy silence fell over everything. I opened my eyes. I was back in Glimmerfall. The town looked as it had in the beginning, bright and colorful, its cobblestone streets bustling with NPCs. The sky stretched clear and blue, the air warm and inviting. Everything seemed as I remembered it. But the perfection felt hollow, every detail too pristine, too static to be real. I looked down at myself, my breath hitched. I wasn't me anymore. I was Vexor again, my body clad in the armor I had once cherished. I tried to move, but my limbs were leaden, unresponsive. An unfamiliar NPC passed by, pausing just long enough to offer a hollow, rehearsed smile. Another NPC waved mechanically, its voice cutting through the stillness like a pre-programmed recording. Welcome back, adventurer. A scream clawed at my throat, trapped and silent. My body was motionless, tethered to the scene like a prop in the world's unchanging script. The truth unraveled in my mind, each thread tightening into a suffocating certainty. I wasn't the player anymore. I was the NPC. The camera withdrew, Arcadia shrinking into the distance as though retreating into itself. The game's title screen appeared, flickering softly before settling into place. In the corner, the active players list updated, a new name faintly etching itself below the rest. Vexor was still there, and beneath it, a new name glowed faintly. You.